Hello, good morning, and welcome. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio, and I'm coming to you live from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. And the studio's a little bit in a turmoil this morning. Don't know what happened in here, but there's some equipment unhooked, and I'm not going to play with it because I don't want to dick it up any further than it already is. But there you have it. Good morning. Hope you had a good weekend. I have been in recovery and research mode all farging weekend long, and I had a good time doing it, I must say. Actually, I was recovering, been sick, but I have been in research and strategy mode, and was able to get a bunch of computer work done. Life is generally good. Still under the weather. I don't know what's going on. Must be the constant changes. Having been mostly in Florida the last several years, the temperature's basically always the same down there. Sometimes it gets a little warmer, but it's always warm. Here, you can't figure out if it's going to be a 65-degree day or a 12-degree day, and you freeze your left one off every time you go outside. And then the next day, it's hot, or very, very warm anyway. Anyway, it gets a little frustrating, and maybe that's part of the thing with my getting colds so often lately, following a couple of home remedies from my sister, God love her, giving me some good information on how to get and stay relatively healthy, although I've never been really a huge unhealthy person. I drink my share of coffee and unfortunately have a few vices like jujubes and stuff like that every now and again, but other than that, I'm fairly healthy. And then, but coffee, got to have your coffee every morning. Sip along now. That's good coffee. So that is good stuff, Maynard. Over the weekend, I've been paying attention a little bit to the escalation of various things going on, and I don't like this occupation discussion they are talking about with Greenland. There's many of the international things I just don't like, and the ultimatums from Trump going on, and now he's making no bones about it. He's definitely become the wartime president, and he's going to create his own wars. I'm doing it. Basically, I heard him over the weekend, and I don't mean to laugh about it because this isn't funny, people. He's like, we need Greenland, so either you're going to get, but either way, we're taking it, basically. It's like, you don't know you never know whether, obviously he's not joking, and that's the horror story of it all. His latest, get this, he says he wants to save Greenland from Russia and China. He doesn't want Russia and China as neighbors. He kind of forgot that Russia's already our neighbor. We were talking not even a couple of months ago after, I suppose it was about 5-6 months ago now, after the summit in Alaska, we were talking about, and there was not just me, but there were other people talking about building a tunnel/bridge system on the Bering Strait between Kamchatka and Alaska, the Juneau part, the Ptarmigan Arm there that comes down, and that's what they were gonna. They were actually discussing. There's been plans along those lines for not plans, but drawings and ideas of that kind for quite a few years, and obviously not going to happen, but rather entertaining, to say the least. And what this guy is what this guy is doing. And now he says, well, we're going to take Greenland over the weekend. Yeah, we're going to take Greenland. He said on Sunday that Denmark's defenses are 2 dog sleds. He goes, Greenland, what are they going to do? Fight me with their 2 dog sleds? You know, I don't have the quote pulled up, but he is renewing his push for NATO to give up. Well, what about Greenland? Nobody's talking about Greenland, you know, and what they want. And Greenland has been pretty clear they don't want, you know, to be, 51st state or whatever for the United States. And Venezuela has been fairly clear, a decent majority of them have been fairly clear that they're not interested in U.S. Colonization either. So Greenland doesn't want to be a colony. Venezuela doesn't want to be a colony. Where else was he planning on going? Cuba doesn't want to be a colony, you know. And Trump, he don't care. He's, well, forget it. I'm taking him. That's that. And now he wants to take Iran too. He's going to have all kinds of fun. So Greenland, basically their defense is 2 dog sleds, he said. In the meantime, you have Russian destroyers and submarines and China destroyers and submarines all over the place. We're not going to let that happen. I don't know what he means by all over the place. What do we have? All over the place. We have destroyers and submarines all over the place. Why would China, which is, I don't know, how many times our size? 1.443 billion people makes them about, 5 times our size or 6? Population-wise. And, we're not going to let that happen. And since the 19th century, a number of officials, U.S., have argued that the Arctic island, which hosts a military base already for the United States, should become American territory. And after Trump reiterated his interest in acquiring Greenland early in his second term, he calls it on national security. It's always for everything, national security. Copenhagen said it would bolster its defenses by adding dog sled patrols and purchasing 2 more Arctic inspection vessels to supplement Greenland's aging fleet of 4. Media reports at the time noted that there were 12 dog sled units, and the autonomous Danish territory is ice-covered with settlements and infrastructure mostly confined to the coast. And the Nordic nations have dismissed Trump's claim about Russian and Chinese threats to Greenland. Well, I do too. That's completely false. It's nonsense, saying that no military activity has been detected in the area in years, said the Financial Times on Sunday. It's simply not true that the Chinese and the Russians are anywhere near there. Now, I added the anywhere near, but the report is there. I have seen the intelligence. No ships, no submarines, a senior European diplomat told the newspaper. And earlier this month, the U.S. military raided Venezuela to kidnap President Maduro. And according to Trump, you're not supposed to use the word kidnap, by the way. We're supposed to use the word captured. According to Trump, the operation was partly intended to reinforce Washington's hegemony in the Western Hemisphere and to counter Russian and Chinese influence in South America. So now, all of this, everything he does now is to... Remember, I've been talking for a long time that the U.S., I don't want to say decline, but parity is coming. Equal nations are some are more equal than others, just like in George Orwell's 1984. Some people are more equal. Some pigs are more equal than other pigs. But you can say that America is more equal than Russia or China when it comes to being a country. And, certainly in enforcing rules or creating their own rules, China and Russia aren't allowed to create their own rules. India, God forbid, create its own rules, but the U.S. will create its own rules, and there's nobody gonna stop them. Because why? The rules do not apply to us. Our government doesn't follow the rules. And why should they? We are special. We have predetermined that we are special. And so therefore, we are, right? Silence. I don't know if I can take phone calls. Like I said, the headphones aren't hooked up. I don't know what's going on in here this morning, but nothing is hooked up. And I don't want to mess anything up, so I ain't going to dink with it and put them back on. So if you're going to call, don't, because I can't answer anyway. Or if I do, maybe it'll just be loud in the studio. I have no idea. But at any rate, we're experiencing all kind of problems this morning. However, Trump's war chants, his war dances, are causing waves in quite a few places, including in Iran. Okay, I don't know what his plans are for starting war all over the country. We know Lindsey Graham's out beating the war drums. He ought to be throwing on a headdress and dancing around a fire and having people beating the drum like normal. But Iran, yesterday, or was it over the weekend? Could have been Saturday. They will conduct preemptive strikes on the U.S. and Israel if they detect an attack. This was from an Iranian parliamentary speaker named Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. The warning comes after President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed support for the protest in Iranian cities triggered by inflation and economics. Let those who threaten Iran be warned. Any attack on Iran will make both occupied territories, all military centers and bases, and American ships in the region legitimate targets, Ghalibaf said on Saturday. We do not limit ourselves to responding only after an attack and will act based on objective signs of a threat so that no one makes miscalculations that will lead them to disaster, he said. Trump has said the U.S. would help protesters if the government continues to crack down on riots that are sweeping the country. You better not start shooting, because we will start shooting too, he said. Netanyahu is also supporting the protesters. And according to the New York Times, Trump has been briefed on the military options, of course. And Trump, he's a wartime president. This peace, I want peace. Don't believe it, because he is talking war. And that is where he is pushing. He again was talking about we're going to be in charge of Venezuela for a while, and we're stealing their oil, and we aren't even paying for it. They're giving it to us. We're taking it. That's that. We're taking the oil. They're giving us whatever it was, 30 to 50 million barrels or something that they're just handing over. Oh, gee, thanks. And he was briefed on military options, including strikes on non-military targets in Tehran. But no final decision has been made. The U.S. and Israel struck last in June of 2025 and targeted military sites and nuclear facilities, and the worst unrest in recent years erupted across Iran in late December. And there have been pretty high increases in food prices and protests and attacks on government buildings. More than 200 people have been killed. Iran's news agency reported that rioters killed 25 civilians and 6 security personnel. And so who knows what we're going to figure out. So the British government, they agreed recently to pay out a substantial sum to settle a lawsuit over its intelligence services role in the torture of a terror suspect who is indefinitely detained by the United States. So this is one of those guys that we just detain, and a guy named Abu Zubaydah, who George Bush once claimed was a senior al-Qaeda figure. He has been held, get this is nonsense, people. He has been held without a trial in U.S. custody, including at a military base in Guantanamo, Cuba, since he was captured in 2002. And the UK has agreed to settle a civil case that accused British intelligence of supplying questions to American interrogators, despite knowing that Zubaydah was being mistreated, his legal team said Monday. Born Zain al-Abidin Muhammad Hussein Zubaydah, 54, he was a Saudi-born Palestinian citizen who fought in the U.S.-backed anti-Soviet insurgency in Afghanistan in the 80s. He was captured in Pakistan in March 2002, and he spent 4 years in CIA black sites, secret detention facilities in foreign countries used for what the Bush administration called enhanced interrogation. U.S. officials described him as a guinea pig for the widely criticized program, though later retracted claims about his high-level role in al-Qaeda. He was transferred to Guantanamo in 2006, so allegedly suffered more abuse there, and is now one of its forever prisoners, whom the U.S. justice system refuses to either charge or release. He previously sued Poland and Lithuania for hosting American black sites. The U.S. has declined to comment on the settlement due to its sensitive nature. And international lawyer Helen Duffy has represented Zubaydah since 2008, said that she is hopeful that the payment of the sum will enable him to do that and support himself when he's on the outside world. However, that his proposed release depends on the U.S. and its goodwill. They're just holding the guy forever. Now, I'm very much against that as well. Either charge him with something or get rid of him. And, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. A total of 26 piece. They shut down in 2009. Is that an old article that I was reading? I don't think so. I don't think so. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, no, that was the payment was that one was brand new, and it says he's still being held, but I'm not positive of that. Maybe he was released. That could be an incorrect part on there, because there's another article that says a number of them were released, but that's an old article, so I don't know. Other important news, an F-16 was shot down in Ukraine, according to a Russian commander. I saw an interesting YouTube video yesterday. I don't know if it was... it wasn't AI. It didn't appear to be AI generated, but I suppose it could have been. That showed a new Su-57 within, almost touching distance of a U.S. warship. Flew in between a couple of them. And wow, that was unbelievable. But now a Russian commander has said his S-300 air defense battery shot down a U.S.-made F-16 fighter operated in Ukraine. In an interview aired on Russia 1 TV Sunday, the commander, who was identified by the call sign Sever, told journalist Vladimir Solovyov that the U.S. aircraft was an interesting target. He said the battery fired 2 missiles at the F-16. The first one damaged it, and the second one delivered the final blow. And it took a lot of time to prepare the operation. They were tracking it and anticipating it. Enemy said that these planes are indestructible, and as it turns out, they fall out of the sky just like the rest. So they didn't say exactly the day on that, but Kiev has allegedly received 44 of 87 jets of the F-16 variety promised by the Europeans. So there you have it. There's been a lot of bombing of Ukraine. And over the weekend, there was an interesting article that I watched that I really should share a little bit of it with you. And if I can pull it up, I think I will, because it was talking about the Oreshnik missile. And if you remember, some time ago, I gave a bit of a detail on Oreshnik, which means hazelnut, and it's a missile that hypersonic, non-trackable, basically. Well, they can track it, but they can't keep up with it. Goes between Mach 9 and Mach 11. The Ukrainians said they tracked it at Mach 10.2 or something like that from last year. And a new one hit inside Dnipro and Dnipropetrovsk, where the Dnieper River is. And another one went, they had several strikes. And the Oreshnik, if you recall, is a hypersonic, nuclear-capable, non-ballistic but a trackable missile. But it's a missile that can hug the ground. And it also has an arc that comes in. If you could shoot, if you do shoot it, it's hypersonic, so it can go up, and it can be a ballistic as well. And so it goes up really high in the ballistic, and then it comes down, and it has more of a direct trajectory toward the ground. And it has inside it has 6 separate. Inside the major canister, which is about 1.5 meters wide, it has another set of stacked 3 sets each. And so 6 canisters of smaller warheads. And each warhead canister has another 6 inside of there. So you basically have 36 missile warheads, I suppose you would call them, that can come down at the same time, and virtually unstoppable. There's no defensive, air defense mechanisms cannot catch them. And they used it some more in the Dnipro over the weekend. All the talk is starting to I don't know what, have its consequences, I think, and is what I think. And the escalation is, and by the way, the front is still moving steadily to the west, and Russia is pushing, and the line is still progressing faster and faster toward the west. And Russia used this Oreshnik, and I watched a pretty good. Well, to me, it's interesting, though. I watched a pretty good YouTube video about the Oreshnik. And there's, let's see if I can find it for you, because I did want to share a little bit of it with you, because this guy was an interesting dude, if I can get there to him. Let's see. Oreshnik number 2. And there's plenty of... this is him. The guy's name is... he's an MIT professor. And his name is Ted Postol, or Postol, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And he gives a very interesting, and he's talking on the show of Daniel Davis. And I don't know if you've watched Daniel Davis in his deep dives, but he's pretty interesting. And you can follow the Oreshnik with him. And Daniel Davis is his show advertises him as a 4-time combat deployed. He's a Bronze Star Medal of Valor in Iraq and a Bronze Star service in Afghanistan. And he has his own podcast and or YouTube channel. And he's got a very interesting guy. And this Ted Postol, Postol, he gives a bit of a class on it, and I wanted to share a little bit of it with you. And they talked about the new Oreshnik. He does a lot of shows. Does Daniel Davis, and so I don't watch enough of them. But he also had Alexander Morkulis on, the guy from England who I interviewed with when I was over in Kazan, and that's a very interesting one too, that they both talk about it, and they live this stuff, and this is what they do, and they're very good at it and quite interesting. I think I will share with you a little bit of at least the beginning of what he said. I don't have any headphones, so I can't hear it unless I play it. So I will listen along with you and see where we're going to go. Here we go.
Authorized the launching of a new type of weapon system, an intermediate range ballistic missile called the Oreshnik, which has now been dominating a lot of the news out there. A lot of people, both inside Russia and outside and in the West and in the United States, are all trying to figure out exactly what this weapon is and what it can do. We had Professor Ted Postol from MIT on shortly after I think like right after, the day after, to give us an initial assessment of what these missiles might be like and what their capabilities are, et cetera. And now then in the intervening time, we've had a little bit more time to analyze this. And so we have some new ideas about what this thing may be. And we have Ted back on with us today very graciously to give us an update on what some of this. And we're going to look at this in light of some of the claims that have been made since you were actually on, and we'll examine those in some detail. But first of all, Professor, welcome back to the show as always.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here as always.
Well, listen, we are always eager to have you on anyway, because you can provide some clarity and at least some knowledge, as opposed to just some opinions that a lot of people are passing without much knowledge, which is a welcome change to the mainstream narrative. But before we get into your presentation, I want to kind of get a running start by showing you what some key people are actually saying about this. First of all, one of the claims that Putin is making is that this is a missile that cannot be intercepted by current technology.
Такому оружию на сегодняшний день не существует. Ракеты атакуют цели со скоростью 10 махов. Это 2,5-3 километра в секунду. Современные, имеющиеся в мире системы противовоздушной обороны и создаваемые американцами системы противоракетной обороны в Европе подобные ракеты не перехватывают. Это исключено.
Well, I don't know why this part is on there. Sorry about that. I meant to speed that up, but I can't hear it in advance, so I'm going to skip past him a little bit and get back to where the guy is.
And it's not really as bad as what he said. According to Forbes in there, they're saying that it's basically the equivalent destructive power of a 2,000-pound bomb, which is, it's not small, but it's not that big a deal. It's not all that accurate. So really, we don't need to worry about it. So we want to know, what is the truth? Is Putin right? Is Forbes right? Or is the truth somewhere in between, as far as you can tell?
Well, there's been a lot of claims made on all sides. But I would say that I have some guesses at the payload capability of the missile, which could be between 6,000 and 9,000 pounds of total throw weight. What throw weight is what the missile can lift and throw onto a trajectory. It is definitely not a boost glide vehicle. By that I mean it is not the rocket motor that launches it toward the target places the trajectory on a classical ballistic trajectory. I'll show you what those trajectories look like. It's what's called a very lofted trajectory because it has a very steep reentry angle at the target area. And the kinetic energy of the incoming munitions, because they come in so fast, gets converted to heat when they hit the ground, and that heat causes the munition to literally turn into a molten metal and vaporize. And the vapors, of course, expand violently, much like the vapors in a high explosive, and they create an explosion effect. The explosion effect, though, is comparable to the weight of the munition in TNT, given the speed. It might be 1.5 times the weight of the munition, or it might be around 1 times the weight of the munition, depending on the actual speed of impact. But the speed of impact is between 3 and 3.5 kilometers per second. That is to say, between Mach 9 and Mach 11, close to there, and the munition weighs itself between 100 and 150 pounds. So it's like being hit with an explosive that's equivalent to about 100, 150 pounds. The munition probably buries itself into the surface a bit. By a bit, I mean a meter or two. This is not penetrating through a big, deep into the ground. And in the process of penetrating into the ground a meter or two, and of course becoming vaporized, it produces a crater. And the crater is a little bit larger than what the equivalent TNT on the surface would produce, but the shock wave in the air is a little bit diminished, but still significant. So you have the equivalent of 66. We know there were 66 munitions. We know that for sure. I can show you data for that.
Okay.
And we and each of the munitions delivers 100, 150 pounds of explosive yield comparable to TNT. So the explosive yield of the total payload was between 6,000 and 7,000 and 10,000 pounds of TNT, spread over a significant area, though, because the munitions fell in clusters about roughly 800 meters to a kilometer long. So the munitions fell in a spread, which is not a surprise, since they were released from 6 separate canisters. So we have a very rough picture. The exact details we don't know, but I believe at this point, I could be wrong, and I'll be happy to tell your audience I'm wrong as we get to know more. But I could be wrong, but I believe now that we have a good basic design picture, conceptual design picture of this weapon. And the conceptual design is the details of the conceptual
this
design
part he's
are
saying,
not
given a concept of the design of it and showing some slides of it. And you know what I think I'm gonna do, since there were some new Oreshnik strikes over the weekend that I wanted to talk about, and a couple of other things. This Oreshnik strikes shows the inside, and he has one, says it's a 6 tubes of 6 different gas supply modes, or whatever the fuel is, the ignition fuel that goes in that pushes them out, and he doesn't know what that is. They showed some remains of what they had collected from the crash site or from the impact site of these weapons, and where they hit and what they did. And it's now, of course, that's quite interesting to me to check these things out, because I'm interested in the Oreshnik and the ballistic capabilities of it and the non-ballistic capabilities, because the Russians claim to have that loitering munition as well, the one that they shoot from their I forget what that one was called, that they shoot from the ships that has the nuclear power portion, that part can linger and can hover for a good long time with virtually unlimited amount of tracking, like an unlimited missile. Oh, they said it was tracking for more than 15 hours when I did that last month, I mean. And there are plenty of people talking about those two missiles. And over the weekend, there was more strikes. Where is the Oreshnik that they have been talking about too? And said that it hit a place where in 3 days ago, they said that the struck back after, the Putin residence, and this hit, they say they hit in an airplane facility where they were storing F-16s and airplane parts and manufacturing apparatus and all of this for airplanes, military aircraft. And so that has been pretty big news over the weekend, is the Oreshnik. And I think that Russia is here's the story is actually came out. Let's see here. Disabled a Ukrainian warplane plant is what they say, and it was in Lviv, and it services F-16s and MiG-29s and produces drones, is what they say. So the Russian strike that used the Oreshnik last week disabled a Ukrainian aviation plant repairing and servicing warplanes and producing long-range drones. In a statement on Monday, the ministry said, citing several independent sources, that the attack hit a facility which supported the operations of Ukrainian Soviet-era warplanes as well as Western-supplied F-16s. And these drones were used for strikes against Russian civilian targets deep inside the territory of the Russian Federation. They said it was a production workshop, storage facility that held finished drones and infrastructure at the plant's airfield. They note that the same attack involved Iskander and Kalibr missiles as well. Some of the projectiles also hit energy infrastructure. Kiev has not commented on the scope of the damage, but the mayor of Lviv, Andrei Sadovy, confirmed that a piece of critical infrastructure had been hit, and last week Moscow said the bombardment was in response to an attempted terrorist attack on the residence of the Russian Prime Minister, Russian President, Putin, in Novgorod. And Ukraine launched 91 drones toward his house. So, I don't know. There's been a lot of discussion on this, but right now, the whole world, in my opinion, is a bit of a mess on because of what we're doing, and there's been so much bad commentary everywhere in the world over what Trump is doing, including amongst European so-called allies as well. And I think he's I would say something like gone off the deep end, but I think this is truly planned. And he now is telling Cuba to act before it's too late, was what he said most recently. He said that Cuba is no longer going to receive Venezuelan oil or money. And he warned the island to make a deal with Washington before it's too late. And Cuba is a close ally of Venezuela and a beneficiary of its oil, has seen supplies dry up since January. Shipping data show no crude cargoes have left Venezuela for the island since Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped by American forces. Because the U.S. oil blockade has halted those deliveries. And so Trump puts on Truth Social, where he puts everything, there will be no more oil or money going to Cuba. Zero. Trump wrote on Truth Social Sunday, said that Cuba lived for many years on large amounts of all caps oil and all caps money from Venezuela. I strongly suggest they make a deal, all caps again, before it's too late, he added. People say you're not supposed to use caps when you're typing on social media because that means you're yelling at people. Dozens of Venezuelan and Cuban security personnel were killed in the U.S. raid this month after Trump said Cuba was ready to fall and cited the island's deep economic crisis and warned that Havana would struggle to endure without subsidized Venezuelan oil. And Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel rejected Trump's threat, saying Washington has no moral authority to impose deals on Havana. Cuba is free, independent, and sovereign. Nobody dictates what we do, he wrote on X on Sunday. I guess everybody's using social media for their diplomacy, huh? And he added that the island had been under U.S. attack for decades and will defend itself if necessary. Caracas and Washington are reportedly moving toward a $2 billion deal under which Venezuela will supply 50 million barrels of crude to the U.S., with proceeds to be held in Treasury-supervised accounts. I tell you what, we're pretty open about our thievery. We're just taking it. That's it. And I just, doesn't anyone question this? Does anyone? It's pretty weird because if Trump is doing this is all right. Well, why can't he supervise everything? I mean, why aren't we all basically just his minions? You know, and he Papa Trump can do everything for the rest of the world. And I'm not, I just am offended by this presumption all the way around that we just get to tell people what to do. It's un-American. I mean, it really is. And I don't like it. Senior Trump officials, including Marco Rubio, made clear they believe the U.S. intervention in Venezuela could push Cuba to the brink. American rhetoric toward Havana has sharpened in recent weeks, for sure, and the U.S. has kept a comprehensive trade embargo on the Caribbean nation since the 60s. While Obama and Biden took steps to normalize relations, Trump reinstated Cuba on the U.S. list of sponsors of terrorism. And, that's how you justify being able to attack them. And, you just justify Greenland by saying their defense is just 2 dog sleds. So why wouldn't we? They only have 70,000 people. Why wouldn't we just assimilate them? We're like the Borg collective. You will be assimilated. That's it. You will be. Whether you want to or not, you will be assimilated. And that's that. We're definitely talking tough, aren't we? So Ethiopia is building Africa's largest airport. If you didn't hear about that, this is a pretty big deal. They've begun an international airport to open in 2030, and it will be Africa's largest airport. It'll be the largest aviation infrastructure project in African history. The first phase of the airport will handle 60 million passengers a year, with an ultimate master plan capacity of 110 million passengers annually, ultimately. 4 runways, 270 aircraft, which exceeds the capacity of the current main international airport at Addis Ababa Bole International with around 25 million passengers a year. And wow, this is pretty cool. But the funding is coming from a mix of sources, including Ethiopian Airlines, international financiers, the African Development Bank, according to the airline's infrastructure development and planning, Abraham Tesfaye, the national carrier, will contribute 30% of the project cost. So these are several other large infrastructure and industrial initiatives launched in Ethiopia in recent months. It's pretty cool stuff that they are growing. I read an article that was published almost a week ago, actually, that was an opinion piece that was a pretty good article, but it's pretty long. And they interviewed a bunch of people about the theater of the American kidnapping of Maduro. And we go in and kidnapping, and the title of the article is called "The Show Was for Everyone, Not Just Latin America," and it's a whole slew of Russian experts that assessed the Trump Venezuela freak show and what we did down there as a country. I mean, it's basically aimed at Latin America and trying to maintain, like everyone knows, U.S. hegemony for another period of time, whether it's, just another 4 years, maybe just the Trump administration, maybe for good. I do believe that Trump realized that, or realizes, as does his entire team, that if we don't act now, the speed with which America becomes less influential will be quicker. So if you want America to still be top dog and still have no rules that apply to us, we just apply them to everybody else, you have to continue to act in this way. So we have to be somewhat tyrannical in order to force the world to recognize that we're still in charge. And that's what's happening, is the basics of all of this. That, we have to put people in their proper places. You know who's in charge, and it's not you. And so we have to dictate that to people by picking on little guys. And we pick on the little guys, steal their stuff, and hopefully that gives the bigger guys the idea that, we really don't want a world war right now. And, we can't take them right now. So basically, this is a buying time effort by the Trump administration. And it was interesting. They interviewed a guy from the New York Bureau of international newspaper, a guy named Valentin Bogdanov. We interviewed him for a while. Anastasia Gafarova, who's a political analyst and a deputy director for the Center of Political Information, was interviewed. Maxim Sukhov, the director of international studies at the Moscow State University, was in there. They interviewed Dmitry Rosenthal, the director of the Institute of Latin America at the Russian Academy of Sciences, Fyodor Lukyanov, editor-in-chief of Russia and Global Affairs, Timothy Bordachov, professor of the Higher School of Economics, Ivan Timofeyev, program director at Valdai, Konstantin Kosachov, deputy speaker of the Federation Council. And it's a very interesting article. And I tend to agree with a lot of the things in there. It was, who's the guy that ended up writing it? It could have been written by a team of people because it doesn't have a major byline on there. And they just had, no, it doesn't have a byline of who it was. And then, but I may share part of that with you on a few of the, later today. We shall see in today's show. But I wanted to get to the Ukraine war, go back there just a little bit, because Trump is now saying that Zelensky had no cards from day one. Yesterday I heard that we're coming up with that since Trump is now a wartime president, that he has come up with, get this, $800 billion that they are supposed to meet and give $800 billion of American money to Ukraine. And so Trump is, I think if this happens, he is fully behind the Lindsey Graham types of the world and fully with them if he gives this money, for a losing effort. Ukraine, Zelensky, according to this article, which was over the weekend, in fact, it was today, Ukraine's Zelensky has no cards to negotiate peace with Russia, said Trump. He made the remarks at a New York Times interview released Sunday and discussed U.S. mediation efforts. These include a leaked 28-point peace plan that we talked about extensively here, envisioning Kyiv ceding the remainder of the Donbass to Russia, renouncing its NATO ambition, and capping its military. Now, nobody wants to force that anymore, and all the talk has been, crazy. The plan has been criticized by Kyiv and Western backers, and it was later cut to 20 points, but key issues remain unresolved, with Zelensky reluctant to concede the territory. The interviewer said, "You famously sat in this room and told Zelensky you don't have the cards," said the interviewer of Trump, referring to his White House spat with Ukrainian leader last year. He didn't have them then. Does he have them now? Was the question. He said, well, he doesn't have the cards, Trump replied. He didn't have them from day one. He's only got one thing, Donald Trump. You can't make this stuff up. Donald Trump is, everything revolves around him. I created that. Remember Obama? I built that business. I built it. Everything is Donald Trump. Well, this never. How many times do we have to hear that this war never would have happened if I'd have been in office? Well, if it wasn't for Joe Biden, this wouldn't have happened. If it wasn't for that idiot that was running the country before, but now it's me, so everything is grand. I'm so tired of hearing that. Can we just talk about present issues without glorifying yourself and demonizing someone else? Please, I just want to talk about the issue. Leave the extraneous bullshit off, please. And he cannot do it. He just cannot. And Trump insisted his mediation is crucial for the peace process. Hasn't worked so far, and claimed that it had helped prevent a far wider crisis. Really? What wider crisis has he prevented? The thing that would have been a total disaster, and Zelensky knows it, and the European leaders know it, if I wasn't involved. Really? I think it would have evolved into a third world war. That won't happen anymore. Is that true? I'm not so positive of that either. He's pushing escalation everywhere. And I'm thinking that there's more chance right now of their escalation in this on both sides. Pressed on the timelines for peace, Trump was, of course, non-committal. Now, before it was, I could have that done in a day. And he said, we're doing the best we can. Now, I don't have a timeline. I just would like to see the war end, he stated, adding that both President Vladimir Putin and Zelensky appear willing to settle, but we'll find out. Last month, Trump met Zelensky in Miami and said a peace deal was 95% ready. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov later echoed that assessment. However, Kiev and its backers from the so-called Coalition of the Willing, a group of Western states pushing continued support for Ukraine, have since agreed to deploy troops to the country as a post-deal security guarantee, which Russia will never go for, despite Russia's repeated rejection of foreign forces near its borders. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff did not confirm any American role, and Trump previously ruled out U.S. troops in Ukraine. Moscow has condemned this plan, with ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova warning last week that any Western troop deployment in Ukraine will be treated as a foreign invasion. So there you go. Meanwhile, there's been a call in the EU for a permanent European army. Have you heard about this? Now they want, instead of NATO, they want a permanent European army. And, you know, when I read this, I thought this was an interesting idea, because right now the army in Europe is the U.S. Army. It's us. You know, the largest force is us. And Poland's close, or Poland might be slightly larger. But, you know, we supply the military force for NATO. And, you know, I think Trump, rightly so, is attempting to reduce the need for us to supply everything. You know, this 5% push for NATO members of their budget to supply the military, and for us to somewhat back off the role of supplying 100% of the military might inside of Europe is kind of a big deal. And so this article, guy named Andreas Kubilius, said the EU must create a 100,000 strong standing army to make military decisions independently of the U.S. and NATO. This was Defense Commissioner Andreas. He's the Defense Commissioner of NATO. Washington still maintains around the same number of troops in Europe. We have about 100,000 in Europe. Speaking at a security conference in Sweden on Sunday, he argued that the EU must pivot from fragmented national armies to an integrated force. This is actually, in my opinion, a good idea. So we need to go for, but I don't know how they would handle the language part. You know, I assume they'd have to figure something out like that. But we need to go for a big bang in defense, he said. We need to invest our money so that we could fight as Europe, not just as 27 national bonsai armies. Citing French President Macron and former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Kubilius noted they were speaking very similar words 10 years ago, that Europe must be more independent and autonomous, and even that we need to have a European army, a powerful standing European military force of 100,000 troops. He called for an overhaul of Europe's military governance and proposed a 10 to 12 member European Security Council to make EU-wide defense decisions, with the UK participating even though it's not part of the bloc any longer. Kubilius suggested that the changes are necessary in light of the threat allegedly posed by Russia, which he claims will continue with a war economy even after Ukraine conflict is no more. Moscow dismissed these claims as nonsense and are distracting Europeans from domestic problems of their own, and justify they use these threats to justify military budgets in Europe, and warned that EU's militarization drive risks escalating tension. Kubilius said the changes are urgent given the U.S. shift in foreign policy under Trump. Well, that's temporary, because you know that as soon as he's gone from office, the Republican or the Democrat are all going to go right back to the way it was pre-Trump. That's what's going to happen. And you don't have to believe that. And you might think that's, something horrible to say, but that's unfortunately what's going to happen. Whether Europe goes to 5% or not, we're going to go right back to the way things used to be. Everybody's going to breathe a big sigh of relief in the military-industrial complex, although Lindsey Graham wins this round anyway. He'll win under any administration, because this is where the money comes from for all these people, and it's always about the money. Don't you remember your "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou"? It's always about the money. Remember the guy beating him up over lunch? Thank you for throwing in that fricassee. I'm a man of large appetite. Remember that? But anyway, he said, the Kubilius said, now it's even more clear that we need to build Europe's independence. Uncertainty of the future of the transatlantic partnership demands our resolve. And as the key NATO power, the U.S. has 100,000 troops in Europe, and Trump said deployments could be reduced, but he denied a full withdrawal. But he stressed that continued U.S. commitment depends on the 5% GDP promise, and this is what they got to pay. And he has, moved that. And Germany's Merz said something pretty similar, if you remember that. This was last month. Remember this? He said that the decades of the Pax Americana are largely over in Europe, and for Germany as well. It no longer exists in the way we knew it. Americans are now very, very firmly pursuing their own interests. And he said that shifting U.S. priorities mean that the EU has to focus more on its own competitiveness and defense. And he also claims this Russian threat. Everybody talks about the Russian threat. And I think they're better neighbors than you guys are. You guys are, frankly, not very good neighbors. Let's see. What else can we share with you today? Excuse me. Running a bit here. Let's see. I wanted to, it was the 8th that Oreshnik strike came out. And there was some interesting video about it on the 8th that came out. So what was the 8th? Thursday? I think. Or what is today? Today's the 12th, isn't it? And so I think the 8th was Friday. And so they had some good video of it that showed it looked like part of it looked like a gas storage facility when I was watching it, because it looked like it was underground footage. And CCTV footage that was shared on Friday showed bright projectiles landing in Lvov, which it's a border of Poland, so it's pretty far west. And it was unconfirmed at the time, but it's confirmed now. And Lviv Mayor Andrei Sadovoy said a piece of critical infrastructure was hit. But on Russian Telegram, they said it was an underground gas facility in the city of Stry, which is about 60 kilometers from Lvov. And it would, if it was confirmed, it would be the second one. Now they say it was an air defense aircraft parts facility. And there's been a lot of news about how Russia hasn't used any of these, and this is only the second strike. And so they were wondering if the first was only a test, or if the expense of these missiles is so great that they haven't produced all that many. Now, what I shared with you a couple of months ago or weeks ago, I don't remember when, we were talking about how many they're how many they're going to produce and how fast they can produce them, and that we expected them to start putting them out as a regular part of the arsenal and releasing them for full production in early 2026. Well, this is real early 2026. The first one went out on January the 8th, so 4 days ago. And that is pretty early. And Russia has indicated that they're going to have these in full production mode for early 2026. So right now, they are probably every night. Last night I watched a report that said there were 140 plus or minus strikes across Ukraine by missiles, drones, and other, aircraft shots during the night. Night before, similar number. Night before, similar number. It's like almost every single night, and they pick different regions. Last night it was Odessa and Kiev, and then this night when this Oreshnik hit on the 8th, it was the Lvov in the western Ukraine. So Odessa has been hit repeatedly, and Russia is continuing to strike Odessa and take out. They hit a ship in the port yesterday as well. There was a ship that they hit, and so there's a pretty good story about that showed what they had hit in the port and how they're attacking all of the things that are supplying the Ukrainian army or the arms, the military industrial complex with parts. Meanwhile, England is, Britain is allegedly making plans to start building its missiles inside of Ukraine that will go 500 kilometers, which will be able to hit Moscow. So all of the things that I see, everything that I've been watching, and I've been hoping that this war would end and will go away. Unfortunately, I believe that's a pipe dream. I don't think it's going away. If anything, I say that it is probably in the way of escalation. And it is unfortunate to me. And I just don't like it. And I don't think the war will settle this year either. I think we need to settle in for a long-term war and keep on going. Not that I want to, I don't, but we aren't making any efforts to stop it. And with everything that we are doing in the West, there ain't no way that Russia is just going to stop, inside of Ukraine based upon the things that the West is doing, especially with the talk about this $800 billion allegedly going to Ukraine from the U.S. in 2026. It's actually like a 10-year plan of $80 billion a year is what they were talking about yesterday. And that is unfortunate if that is the way we go. I'm going to try to share two more stories with you. One from January 9th and one from the 10th. And they're both fairly long. articles, and this one is written by a Canadian independent journalist, and her name is Ava Bartlett. And the title of her article is called "Here's Who Really Weaponizes Children in the Russia-Ukraine Conflict." As the accusations of abductions resurface, it's clear the West doesn't care about the facts on the ground if they contradict the narrative. And this is a Canadian lady. And I believe similarly. And so I thought I'd share this with you one more time because it's part of the rhetoric of nonsense that has been cast across the West all the time, that that Russia has stolen 20,000 children, and it's just nonsense. It's crazy. And for the last 3 years, this is her article. For the last 3 years, Ukraine and concerted legacy media campaigns have been screaming that Russia has abducted or forcibly displaced thousands of Ukrainian children, even up to 1.5 million. The accusations resurged in December with a UN General Assembly vote on a draft resolution on the return of Ukrainian children. During the meeting, Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Mariana Betsa once again pushed claims that at least 20,000 Ukrainian children have been deported to Russia, in spite of the fact that months prior, during the June Istanbul talks, the Ukrainian side finally provided a list of the children it accused Russia of abducting. 339 children in total, surprisingly far fewer than the number they have alleged for years. The absence of over 19,500 on the list indeed leads to many questions. Mainly, is Ukraine lying again? Recall that in 2022, the accusations by now former Ukrainian ombudswoman Lyudmila Denisova about sexual atrocities allegedly committed by Russian soldiers were revealed to be lies and propaganda, so much so that Denisova was sacked. But before her dismissal, legacy media and the UN all backed those lies. Some recent accusations are that children are being sent to labor camps in Russia, 165 re-education camps where Ukrainian children are militarized and Russified, or even of being sent to North Korea, as Katerina Rashevskaya of the Ukrainian Regional Center for Human Rights told the U.S. Committee on State, Foreign Operations, and Related Programs on December 3rd. The footnotes of the claims made by Rashevskaya, instead of the source for the information, say the Regional Human Rights Center can provide information upon request. In other words, her sources are, "Trust me, bro." Regarding the North Korean camp in question, if 2 Russian teens were sent there, they'd potentially be made to enjoy water slides, basketball and volleyball courts, an arcade room, a rock climbing wall, art and performance halls, an archery range, a private beach, and hikes in the mountains. Regarding the list of 339 children Ukraine says were abducted by Russia, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova remarked 30% of the names on the list could not be verified, as most of those children were never in Russia, are now adults, or have already returned to their families. As for the Ukrainian children who are actually in our country, they are under state care in appropriate institutions. They are safe for now. In many cases, their evacuation from combat zones saved their lives. Local children rights commissioners are now working to reunite them with their relatives. Just as legacy media has whitewashed the 8 years of Ukraine's war against Donbass civilians prior to Russia commencing its military operation in 2022, including the Ukrainian shelling that killed 250 children starting in 2014, media likewise ignore the children Russia says are missing. During talks in Istanbul, Zakharova noted the Russia side presented Ukraine with a list of 20 Russian children who are either currently in Ukraine or relocated from Ukraine to Western Europe, including the countries that endorse this very statement. Now, the burden falls on these states to provide Russia with a substantive response regarding our list of 20 children. Recently, Donbass-based journalist Krystal Niant wrote about a report published in a pro-Ukrainian website that broke the story of 510 Ukrainian children who had been evacuated by Ukrainian oligarch in 2022 from Dnipropetrovsk to Turkey, where the benevolent foundation which brought them there allegedly allowed its staff to beat the children, sexually assault them, and deny them food if they refused to perform on camera to raise funds for their lodging. These are some of the reported violations of these orphans' rights. The details of the report show that the children suffered physically and psychologically. Additionally, 2 underage teens were impregnated by staff at the hotel they stayed in, with educators allegedly aware of the interactions. According to Niant, the orphanage director's response to the fact that one of the teens in her care became pregnant was to blame the girl. This young girl comes from an asocial family. Well, this way of life is already inscribed in every cell in the blood of these children. In almost 10 years of work in Donbass, Niant wrote, I've conducted or filmed many humanitarian missions to orphanages in the region, and never ever have I heard a director make such vile remarks about one of the children in her care. Even the most difficult and recalcitrant were cared for with pedagogy, love, and patience. Ukraine hunting down children. In April 2023, Krystal Niant and I interviewed Artyomovsk civilians who had been recently rescued by Russian soldiers. In addition to being deliberately shelled by Ukrainian forces who knew they were sheltering in the basement of a residential building, the civilians we spoke to told us about Ukrainian military police hunting for children. The evacuees told us some of these police went by the name of White Angels and were taking children away without the consent or that of their parents. Around that time, more reports came out about these abductions or attempted abductions, including an 11-year-old girl who spoke of how the White Angels, who introduced themselves as military police, came to the basement she was sheltering in with a photo of her, looking for her, and saying they needed to take her away because Russia killed her mother. According to the girl, her mother was alive and with her. Reports of these abductions also emerged in Avdiivka, Kupiansk, Slavyansk, Chasov Yar, and Konstantinovka, as well as in Ukrainsk and Zhelezhnaya. Niant wrote of a July 2023 conference on Ukraine's crimes against the Donbass children, in which Lilia and her daughter Kira from Shastya in the Lugansk People's Republic spoke. They gave evidence of how, here's the quote, at the start of the special military operation when Ukraine controlled Shastya, around 10 children were taken from a school in Shastya to western Ukraine by the headmistress of the school on orders from Kiev without informing their parents. The children were even forbidden to call their parents, she wrote. But Kira knew her mother's telephone number by heart and managed to call her to let her know they were in Lviv and then Kust. Thanks to Lilia's determination to find her daughter, we discovered how Kiev exports the children it abducts. Ukraine had forged a new original birth certificate for Kira. The girl said she and the other children were to be sent to Poland. This is terrible. Former SBU officer Vasily Prozorov spoke at the same conference where he explained, according to Niant, that one of his investigations had revealed that some of the children abducted by Ukraine are sent to pedophile networks in Great Britain via a whole network of Ukrainian and British officials or former officials who work together. On the British side, members of MI6 and the Foreign Office are involved. Prozorov, she wrote, spoke of another of his investigations on organizations registered in EU countries involving in exporting children from Ukraine under the pretext of providing them with shelter. These organizations take unaccompanied Ukrainian children out of Ukraine. What happens to them afterwards is unknown. In November 2022, in the southern Russian seaside city of Anapa, I met numerous people displaced from Kherson who were being lodged in hotels and apartments in the city. The first site I visited was only a few minutes by taxi outside of the city, one of many hotels along the coast. The hotel director showing me around said they don't call them refugees, we call them guests of the building, and spoke affectionately of them, how grateful they were to be there, far from any shelling. Just under 500 refugees had been living there since October. No guard monitored the entrance or exit. The refugees walked around tidy grounds, but in any case, I asked about their freedom of movement, or lack thereof. They move freely, of course. We don't prohibit them from going out. Many aren't here now because they're in town looking for jobs, getting documents. Children are at school. With my hired translator, I spoke with two Kherson women, a young mother and her own mother, to hear their stories. We were living with explosions at night. It was scary, not only for myself, but for my children and for my grandchildren, said the older woman. When you go to bed, you don't know if you will get out of bed in the morning. We were forced to leave. I asked him who was shelling. She said, word of mouth transmits very clearly, and people around us spoke about it. We were bombed by the armed forces of Ukraine. Russian soldiers were protecting us. The younger woman said she used to speak with the Russian soldiers there. They are friendly. We wanted to hug them because we felt protected. They helped us, gave us humanitarian aid, brought it to the house. Some minutes taxi ride away, I visit an apartment complex that could have served tourists in the summer. There, 50 buildings housed around 1,500 refugees who also arrived in October, mostly from Kherson. My translator and I walked around, passing playgrounds, a pharmacy, a library, a swimming pool, a gym, a small petting zoo, and a kindergarten. Near a playground, I spoke with a mother sitting on a bench with two of her 4 children. In the early days, there was bombing. We spent 2.5 weeks in the basement. It was unbearable. The children were very afraid. One of her daughters became ill. She had acute inflammation of the lower jaw, we think due to hypothermia. We took her to Simferopol, and she had surgery. In Anapa, she said, her children had full medical exams. We were helped by the mayor of the city of Anapa, and we are grateful. His mother called 3 days in a row saying, where are the children? We answered, they went to the cinema, they're playing, etc. She said, show me the children. They say they took your children from you, but they didn't. Whereas legacy media continue to push the evil Russia kidnapped children narrative, there is ample evidence that Ukraine is guilty of doing precisely what it accuses Russia of. There is also a significant absence of evidence regarding the 20,000 kidnapped children claims that are still being pushed in the Western media. Will media investigate the reports of abuse of Ukrainian children in Turkey? Surely not. It wouldn't suit their scripted anti-Russia bias. And once again, that article was written by a Canadian independent journalist named Ava Bartlett. And she has also done stories in Syria and Palestine, always, well, not always, but a lot of times about children, abuses, that kind of thing. And I've been talking about this for a good long time, about this number of 20,000 that they could never, ever come up with. And there was, when the war first escalated in 2022, when Russia went into the Donbass area, there was a huge bunch of stories about this 20,000 children that were taken. And it's been debunked from day one, except in, Ukrainian narratives like by Zelensky or by whoever wants to pump the nonsense out for people. But legitimate sources that come out, real sources, people that have investigated it, don't believe any of it. Nor do I. But it just doesn't fit the narrative. And they've been asking for the list of these people for a good long time. And Lavrov always says, look, you've given us 300 names. Where are the rest? Where are this 20,000 you were talking about? And I don't know. It just, the stories continue to devolve. I was thinking I could share that other story with you, but I guess not. That one took a little longer than I thought, and it's basically how the U.S. is redoing world politics after the Trump move, and that was an interesting one too. I'll share that with you tomorrow, most likely, unless I come up with something else. I appreciate you being with me here today on International Flavor, and paying attention to us here on Damn Radio. We like it when you do. Today, for the schedule, we have my show's ending here in a minute, and JR will be with us at 2 p.m. In between, there will be the wonderful music brought to you by Damn Radio. And at 4 p.m., we have Search for Solutions, and at 6 p.m., Jack's Car Show. Tomorrow it'll be me, JR, and Search for Solutions. And the big day on Wednesday, we'll start with me. Then we have the Damn Schwag at 9 with Jimmy Tebow. Gabby Hayes Show. JR's Really Big Shoe, Search for Solutions, and then ending with the Ike Skelton for the biggest day in Damn Radio, which is Wednesday. If you want to follow the schedule, you can go to damnradio.com/schedule. You can always listen to my show. All the shows are recorded, and put out on internationalflavor.com for your listening pleasure. I appreciate you being here and hope you join us again tomorrow. Have a very great day.